Hello everyone, I am here to chat with you today about using up the things I have and kind of slow minimalism. I also want to mention Project Pantry and things like these. Okay, that was a bit of an abrupt drinking on my side. Okay, I say let's get started. So I actually thought about this topic while knitting these past few days because after like 6 months, I found my knitting energy, my knitting mojo, I think it's what it's called, again, and I knit some things. And as you know from a recent video I posted, I'm gonna link it up here for you where I showed you everything I own. I also told you there that I just feel like I have too much yarn. I did this knitting business a few years ago, but it didn't work out the way I wanted. But I still have so much yarn left from that time, and now we're already deep into my philosophy of why I deal with it the way I do. And so I thought about this concept of like slow minimalism. I don't know if that is a term. I think eco-minimalism certainly is. And that is something that I would say applies to me in a sense that I try to find a balance between being a minimalist, not owning more than I need or like more than the things that I really, really care about. But this also, the eco part of it also heavily includes not buying absolutely like more than I absolutely need and also not decluttering more than I need. I made a few videos about like stopping to declutter, and I think that's like pretty crazy when we talk about minimalism. And I also think it's more easily possible when you're already a minimalist, not when you're starting out with way too much stuff. Now let's maybe take this to a more practical point and talk about actual stuff. So a few weeks ago, I watched a video by Amy Lucas, and I do have to say I love her videos. I watched her video about Project Pantry, and I knew she was doing that, but it just wasn't something I was paying a lot of attention to. And then I saw this video and I watched it and I was really inspired. I thought I need to do that as well. If you don't know what Project Pantry is, it's kind of similar to Project Pan, which refers to like a project or a challenge where you try to use up your makeup products and hit pan and just make sure you use the things you have before they go bad instead of like always buying more and not even knowing maybe what you own. And then Project Pantry is the same but with your pantry, so that's something that I can do because I don't really own makeup, but I have a pantry. And because we love to cook and we love to try out many new different ingredients from like all different continents, we have a lot of things. And we also have quite a few things that sometimes we buy for a certain recipe or we buy because we want to try it out, but then we never actually do. And it would be really sad if it got like was to go bad. And so we make a plan, and we were like the last 5 meals we made were meals not completely made up of things to like use up, but quite a part of them was things we already had in our home for a long time. And I think I mentioned it in my vlogs recently, but I have this feeling of like wanting to declutter a little bit or wanting to like gain control over my life maybe. And I think this is actually one of the best things to do, and to do it in a way that is actually like sustainable and doesn't cost money. Because I think a lot of times when we want to change our lives, gain control, we are urged to like go out and buy organizers, buy new stuff, buy, just spend money or even like declutter and throw away resources. But Project Pantry really makes us look at what we already have and use these things up. And yes, we have to get creative. And yes, sometimes it might be a bit annoying, but it definitely like saves us money and it prevents food waste. And so it's an amazing thing. And a similar thing I think many people have with a lot of other things like makeup or in my case, yarn. Coming back to the yarn. And that is a problem I know a lot of like fiber arts crafting people have. So I'm not the only one. And even though I'm a minimalist, I still have a yarn stash. So this is my strategy with yarn stash, with my pantry, with all of the things that I own that I want to use up instead of decluttering. Because when decluttering, I'm just never sure if it's actually going to be used again. And yeah, if I just throw it out, then it would be completely wasted, and I absolutely don't want that. So, number 1, stop buying. As soon as I realized that I'm not knitting as much as I thought, I stopped buying yarn, because I think there's no way we're ever gonna deal with anything like this if we keep like bringing in things, but we're not using the stuff we already have. It is the same for my pantry, right? I'm not gonna buy a bunch of new food if I have so much food I need to use up, of course. And that also goes for yarn, depending on the type of crafting person you are and the projects you want to do. Maybe you need to buy a little bit of yarn to make the projects using the yarn you already own. It depends. But in my case, I had enough yarn and I just wanted to use what I had, especially if I wasn't sure how it's going to continue, because after these few years of being really crazy about knitting, I realized that sometimes for months, I actually did not really feel like knitting that much. And so I don't know, if it's gonna come back or if it's never gonna be a hobby again that I'm interested in. So I don't want to buy yarn. And then the second thing is, I think it's okay to declutter. And decluttering here in a sense of looking at your things and decluttering the things that you know are just not useful in your house and in your life. I think this goes for every kind of decluttering. Also for clothes that I own, definitely for yarn that I own, definitely also for pantry items, for everything I own. If there's really like no point, if it doesn't make sense, it completely, like, it doesn't fit or it would go bad, but I'm not gonna use it, it's a color that I'll never wear, like, it doesn't make sense that I spend weeks making a sweater that I'm not gonna wear. If it's really something that I'm not gonna be able to use, or if you have that much supply that you're not gonna be able to use it up in your lifetime or in the time before it goes bad, I think it does make sense to declutter. But decluttering responsibly is such a task, making sure that it goes somewhere where someone can use it. But so that's the second step. And that's what I did, especially with yarns that I just knew I was not going to use, with yarns that were bigger quantities. And I made sure that I found someone, I gave it away for free on an online marketplace. And I think a kindergarten or something went and came and picked it up for crafts there, something like that. So I'm left with yarn that I can potentially think like I could do something with. And that's the time, I think, where we start making stuff. So after a long period of time where I really didn't feel like knitting, this spring I actually had a new project in mind that I really wanted to do. But first I had one project on my needles that I finished. Now, I think you can be like, it's okay to frog something that you're not gonna make anymore. And it's the same for every kind of craft or everything. Like, if you started something and you're not gonna finish, I think it's totally fine to abandon it and say, this is not gonna happen. On the other hand, it's also okay to just leave it a bit longer if you think that you're actually gonna come back. In my case though, I thought this is the motivation I need because I wanted to do this other project. Now I have the motivation to do this project in order to then start the other project. Like, it gave me enough motivation. The thing I'm talking about is this sweater. It's like a scrap project and it's a knitting technique I have not done before. And it's really soft and squishy, and I think it's beautiful. I'm not sure if I completely like the fit, but I have worn it quite a bit, and I have to put in the ends a little bit again, because with these scraps, there are just a lot of ends. But I think it's a cute sweater for autumn, and I tried something out here, and I used only stuff from my stash, and in general, I'm happy with how it turned out. But once I was done with this one, I was so excited to do this one. This is another scrappy project. It has just different colors and stripes and even this dog wool that's really, really fluffy. But yeah, that's what I did this spring, also entirely, of course, from things from my stash. And then it got warmer and my motivation to knit was not existent. But a few days ago, after fixing socks that I had laying around, fixing sweaters that I had laying around, making a hat from a sweater that had so many holes I couldn't fix it anymore, because that I think is also a really important part, not just making new stuff, but fixing the things we already have. Because yeah, I'm going to talk more about that later. But then I was actually motivated again to knit. So I knit a hat for my son because he wanted to have another hat, and he has some, but he loses them as well. So, you know, I thought I can knit another hat. It's going to be useful. I knit like, this is just like for washing dishes. And then I knit a pair of socks for my boyfriend. And I combined 2 different sock yarns from my stash here, and I think they turned out so interesting. It's just, I also like projects where I have fun making them. That's really important. Like, it should be fun making them, and it should be useful in the end, and it shouldn't be just to use up things from my stash to get my stash smaller. So yeah, a fun pair of socks for my boyfriend. And then I'm knitting on a, whoops, almost lost some stitches there, on a second pair of socks for my boyfriend, also combining 2 sock yarns, and I think it looks quite funny. And I just started on the second sock. Now, a friend of mine visited me a few days ago, and I gave her a skein of wool for a hat she wanted to knit, and now my son got suddenly interested in knitting again, so of course I gave him a skein of wool to knit a scarf for himself. And this is all the knitting I've done this year so far. So this is a very realistic picture of a part-time knitting enthusiast. So sometimes I'm like really in the mood of knitting and I knit a lot of stuff, but then sometimes the months go by without me knitting. After repeating the steps, stopping to buy new things, decluttering what you're actually not going to use, and then starting to use what you have. I think it is really, really important that we don't get too impatient, because I think, yes, it's a good goal to get your stash down to a certain number, either because you then allow yourself to buy new things again, or because, that's just your goal. For me, I have the goal of fitting it into one drawer, and I'm going to show you in a minute. But what I think would be a huge mistake is just making things for the sake of busting your stash, for the sake of like having it out of your stash. Now, for some people that might make a little bit of sense because you love knitting and then you make something and you had a good time making it. But for me, that doesn't make sense, because for me, knitting, yes, I like knitting, but I also want to have a finished product that I'm actually going to use. So I think one of the great ways to do that also is to gift things to other people, because in my case, my wardrobe is kind of full. The space my wardrobe can have is full. So I'm actually not going to make so many more knitted garments for myself as long as the other garments are still good. And also with the other garments, I'm going to fix them until they fall apart, and I can't fix them anymore. So it's taking a long while before I have more space again in my wardrobe to knit more things for myself. So I'm only knitting what I can actually use, what actually fits in my wardrobe, or what other people can use, so I can actually give it away from my belongings. And that is again, of course, where the slow minimalism comes in, because that is taking time. Even though I would have liked my stash to fit in this one drawer like 2 years ago, we're actually only barely there now. So let's look at this yarn drawer. So this is the drawer where now all of my yarn fits into, plus we have like a sweater that I made but that I want to like take apart again, and also like this was supposed to be a scarf, but also it didn't turn out long enough, so I'm leaving it there until I have another project in mind with the yarn. Then a few weeks ago there was more yarn in here, and now you see yarn, right? Ideally, I would like to fit this basket into this drawer as well, but that's gonna take some time because we have sock yarn, we have like sweater yarns and stuff like that. This is just like smaller scrap yarns and also some fabric and some like zippers and all like random stuff. And this is also for embroidering, and in the future, maybe at some point, it's all gonna fit into one drawer. Then I also have a bag here. This contains the yarn for another project that I have in mind that I want to start next, which is actually something for my wardrobe. It's a sweater vest, and I'm gonna update you in my vlogs for sure. So look out for that, and then we're just gonna continue on our journey to using up all the yarn. So yeah, that was the story about my yarn and handcrafting and my stash. And I think it does apply to our hobbies and our areas of life. And I just want to show you, how slow minimalism and eco-minimalism can look. But in the end, I do have to say, I think it's deeply satisfying, that approach, like doing things slowly and actually like making things that I am gonna use or my family is gonna use or friends are gonna use. Because I think even though it might be like instant gratification if I declutter a whole bunch of yarn just to have less, or if I like knit a whole bunch of stuff I'm not actually wanting to use just to have less in my stash. But I think in the long run, it makes a lot more sense and it's gonna save me money, it's more sustainable, and it's, I think, also just, it gives me more satisfaction if I know that I'm not like, I don't know, skipping steps or using knitting or just hurrying a process that actually takes longer. Also, I kind of feel like it's my responsibility if I bought all of this yarn to make sure I take care of it and use the resources well. Let me know what you think about all of this, and if you have like an area in your life where you also have like a lot of things that you're using up, or if it's like in your kitchen, in your bathroom, in your household, maybe you have a stash of toilet paper left over from 2020, I don't know. But thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna link you our video here that you can check out. And other than that, don't forget that there's Patreon where you get an extra podcast episode every single week. And apart from that, I hope to see you here or in my next video. Goodbye.